Thank you all, and I have to say, it is a long, enduring and incredibly productive relationship that I have had with master builders across Australia. And in particular, can I acknowledge Danita? Danita is someone who I have known for a very, very long time before she was actually heading up the Master Builders Association across Australia. But to be able to have the relationship that we do, to have each other on speed dial, I think we've spoken several times this morning already, I don't need to tell you how valuable that is for your organisation. Each one of you in this room, I've probably worked with either yourself or one of your associates. I think one of the proudest moments for me was working in particular in concert with master builders back now, if you recall, in 2016. We backed you in relation to the re-establishment of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. We took the legislation through the Senate twice. It was rejected on both occasions, and true to our word, we dissolved the Parliament. We went to a double dissolution election, backing in ourselves, backing in you, backing in your industry, because we believe that a well-functioning building industry only provides dividends to the Australian economy. Despite all the odds, and believe you me, and Danita was at the forefront of this, people said we could never do it. We could never do it. There were too many crossbenchers in 2016 to negotiate with, from the far left to the far right. And I didn't have a cent to negotiate. I had to negotiate on the basis of good arguments that I could articulate on your behalf. And people often reflect and they say, Michaelia, why do you think working with master builders back in 2016, you were actually successful in getting the crossbench from that very, very diverse spectrum across the line to actually support the re-establishment of the Australian Building and Construction Commission? The answer is actually very easy, and it goes to where we are today, now that I'm in opposition. It's a very sad day for you because as of yesterday, the Australian Building and Construction Commission is no longer. I think the happiest man in the country at this point of time is probably John Setka. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, South Australia are currently working out what John Setka is all about. But it's because we presented an economic argument. This wasn't about bashing a union. Unions have a place in society. There's no two ways about it. But when they take action that is detrimental to the Australian economy, and that is clearly set out in the Ernst & Young report commissioned by master builders, the value that your industry provides to the Australian economy, I was able to translate that value back then to the crossbench, and they understood, in the first instance, you needed a tough cop on the beat because of the militant actions of the most militant union in Australia. And as you know, that's not me saying that. That are judges across varying courts, including the High Court of Australia, who say that. The treatment of women on site, the deliberate use of safety as an excuse to get on site. But more than that, it's a cost to the Australian taxpayer. Ultimately, if you don't have a well-functioning building industry, ultimately the people who lose out are the Australian people. And that's the argument we need to continue to prosecute going forward, because what happened has happened. The ABCC is gone. The Registered Organisations Commission has gone. They've got in their same job, sorry, we're getting to that one, they've got in their multi-employer bargaining legislation. And thank you for all the work you did with me to articulate the arguments. Can I acknowledge again in particular Sean Schmicky and Danita Warren, who were instrumental in getting me questions to ask at estimates on your behalf. We have a fight on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. But can I tell you I'm up for it? I know Danita's up for it, and I know you're up for it. We've been there, we've done that, and we will continue to fight for the building industry across Australia. I'm sure my leader, Peter Dutton, will have reconfirmed with you that if we are re-elected, we will of course re-establish the Australian Building and Construction Commission. Your industry deserves nothing less. A tough cop on the beat. Just by way of some opening comments, and then Danita's going to wind me up because, as you know, I could talk all day on this subject. I just want to remind you of the battle that you face. And it's a successful battle at the moment because they have the numbers in the House of Representatives, and within reason, they have the numbers in the Australian Senate. The Greens will always side with Labor when it comes to industrial relations. It may be lost on some, but if you recall the Lend-Lease case, Lend-Lease took on the Australian Building and Construction Commission in relation to the display of certain items on site. It was all about freedom of association, as you know, under the Building Code. The CFMMEU decided to be smart and intervene in the case. The courts found in favour of the Building Code and the Australian Building and Construction Commission because it was all about freedom of association and the right to join a union or to not join a union. In the normal course of events, as you know, the person who does not win pays the costs. And there is a federal court costs order issued by Justice Snowden in favour of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, who expend taxpayers' money when they take on cases to the tune of in excess $400,000. So you'd think, OK, great, they've got a costs order. The CFMMEU have been ordered by the Federal Court of Australia to pay the costs, so around $400,000. Because it was a constitutional issue raised, the ABCC have to actually seek permission from the Attorney-General. The Attorney-General is now Mark Dreyfus. So they did the right thing. They said, well, it's reasonable costs we'll go after, so we'll actually reduce the amount to $150,000 on behalf of taxpayers. We have the costs order in place, but they had to seek the permission of Mark Dreyfus to pursue them. Does anybody know what Mark Dreyfus said? Why don't you have a guess? No, exactly, an absolute disgrace. On behalf of the Australian taxpayer, Mark Dreyfus, as Attorney-General of this country, blocked the ABCC from pursuing costs in relation to a matter that they won in the courts. That's the fight that we're up against. And then, of course, I don't need to let you know, but I will. Last week, we had the donations released. I'm sure you were brought up to speed very quickly. The CFMEU donated, just in the last 12 months, $4.3 million to the Australian Labor Party. The unions themselves donated $16 million, and they spent an additional $22 million on political campaigning. Why do I say that? I'm not trying to make political points here, because it's your reality. This is what we face together. This is the Labor Party now, in particular in the industrial relations portfolio, implementing, and there's no doubt about it, what is a union agenda. The first piece of legislation that they put through last year, the industry-wide bargaining, well, guess what? The ACTU got its way. Time will now tell as to whether or not you actually do see real wage increases as a result of this legislation, or you merely see an increase in union membership because people are literally roped into unions compulsorily by way of this bargaining process. But I think for you, the issue becomes what to expect going forward. Now, I would not normally read a press club speech given by a Labor minister, but I just want to take you through, because this is very interesting, two of the comments he made, which really does set the tone for how you'll be working with, in particular, Tony Burke and the Albanese government. So this is Tony Burke at the press club on the 1st of February. In his opening comments, he said this: "You will have people say what it was like to work with the previous government when consultation is talked about now. Back then, what the previous mob were requesting was confirmation. And if you didn't deliver confirmation, you were given confrontation. The consultative approach that we have applied to the Parliament itself and to the way we have governed is of itself not just a difference in the way this government functions, it also delivers a difference in the quality of outcomes." Well, if you're the Australian Union movement, you'd be delighted with those comments. But when I look at the consultation that occurred in relation to the first tranche of industrial relations legislation and the outcomes that were achieved, that is a very strange form of consultation. But the good news for you all is this. In this same press club speech, Mr Burke announced that he would be opening up consultation, and I know you've already been invited to join them, in relation to the next tranche of Labor's industrial relations agenda. And at least he was honest and referred to it as the more controversial parts of the industrial relations agenda. The biggest issue I have in terms of what I know is on the agenda, and in particular when I look at Mr Albanese's private members bill in opposition, the same job, same pay bill. As you and I know, same job, same pay sounds fantastic. And if we went out and polled anybody in the street, they would say to you, well, of course, if you're doing the same job, you should get the same pay. I'm a little confused as to why you're asking me the question. Because the bill has nothing to do with same job, same pay. It is all about decimating labour hire in Australia, unionising people and actually taking away the ability of an employer to run a workplace in a manner that suits them. And the last time I checked, employers would normally run a workplace in a manner that is productive, which grows the workplace, it grows the economy, it enables them to actually pay their employees more. But Labor doesn't think that you do that. And so with the same job, same pay bill, I will be asking you, and Danita's already made this offer, as has Sean Schmicke, to work very closely with us, because we do need to understand the impact. And it won't be just on you. It'll be people that you might bring onto site. What is going to be the actual impact of this legislation for you and for anybody you are dealing with? We need to prosecute those arguments on your behalf. I am more than happy to do that, but we also don't want to prosecute them at the last minute. We need to start prosecuting them sooner rather than later, and it cannot be just saying, oh, but the unions. It's got to be, yet again, the economic arguments as to why labour hire itself is actually good for the country. In any event, when you actually look at labour hire around Australia, does anybody know what the proportion of labour hire is in a percentage terms of all employees? It's 2%. It's 2%. It's been relatively stable for the last decade. So if you translate that into actual people, of the nearly 13 million people that are employed, less than 115,000 were employees paid by a labour hire firm. The record high for labour hire was actually 1.5%, and that was actually under Labor. It's been relatively stable at around 2%, but the actual figures are actually around 1.1 and 1.5. And again, they're not doing this because they care. They're doing this because they don't believe in alternative forms of employment. The other issues that I have in relation to the proposals by Tony Burke, this is basically what you're going to be up against. They're pushing a series of changes, including same job, same pay for labour hire workers, defining a casual. Well, I would have thought we'd taken care of that working with you 2 years ago. Minimum conditions for employee-like work and the gig economy, in other words, regulate the gig economy. Wage theft, well, we had proposed 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, criminalising wage theft. They voted against it. And one of the bigger issues that I'm going to face, which again I was able to abolish back in 2016, is the long-awaited return by the TWU of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal. So the 35,000 owner-drivers across Australia were about to go in to another battle on your behalf. But again, as I said, you know you've got a friend in Peter Dutton, you know you've got a friend in me. I have worked very closely with you the entire time I have been in Parliament, and I recommit myself to working closely with you. I won't stop fighting on your behalf, and I really look forward to working with you. It won't be under this government, but certainly under any future Dutton-led government, getting the best outcomes from your industry and for your industry in Australia. Thank you.